assistant was sitting there with a notepad, all in the room about the size of a broom closet. And I was sitting on this folding chair with a day-old cup of coffee in a styrofoam cup. And the counselor asked me to do the strangest thing. He said, Ed, I want you to ask God what lies you believe about you. Now,
that's different.
If I had my way, I would have walked immediately out of the room. The first thing was I knew God wasn't going to speak to me because God didn't speak to people. And the second thing is I thought, well, if he does speak, I don't want to hear what he has to say because I'm sure he's going to tell me how disappointed he is or how upset he is with the life that I had led up until that point. And so I was trying to find a way out of the room. But I'd paid for an hour, so I was going to stay for an hour. And so I asked the question, but I didn't ask because I thought it would work. I asked because I was told to ask the question. And so I said, God, what lies do I believe about me? And then I heard his voice. And he said to me...
But you're a guy that doesn't hear his voice.
I mean, like, when he speaks, he has a way of cutting through the clutter. And he said, very clearly, he said to me, you believe you are alone. And in that moment, my mind actually transported in the spirit.
This was the lie that you...
This was a lie. He said, the lie you believe is that you're alone. In that moment, my entire spirit was transported to when I was 6 years old. I'm sitting in the back of a car without seatbelts, and my mom is sitting in the front of the car also without seatbelts, and my dad is standing on the side of that road, and they're having through the window of the car a divorce intensity argument about who is going to pay for my second attempt at kindergarten, of all things. And my mom is yelling at my dad's yelling at my mom. By the way, two beautiful people, just so you know, they were just having a hard time. And in her frustration, my mom throws this application out of the window of the car. It blooms into the air, and she starts to drive away. And as she's driving away, about 10 yards later, I, out of the backseat, for reasons still unknown to me, I yell, stop! She stops the car, I open the door, and I go start picking all these papers up off the ground, and I'm seeing this whole memory in the spirit, and then I hear myself tell myself at 6 years old, say, well, I guess you're all alone now. And those words, 6 or 7 words, became literally like a self-fulfilling prophecy for me. It was like a self-licking ice cream cone that just kept perpetuating in my life over and over again. It made it difficult for me to connect with my wife, made it very hard for me to connect emotionally with my kids. I had a revolving door of employees. The idea that I was alone became my life theme, and all of a sudden I see that as a lie. So I'm snapped back into the counselor's room, and the counselor looks at me and says, now I want you to ask God what's true. Suffice it to say,
there were two questions. What lie and what's true?
And suffice it to say, when he asked the second question, I'm ready to go for it. Like, I'm not doubting at this point. I already heard God's voice, and he already brought me in that moment. And God clearly spoke to me a second time, and he said, you've never been alone. He said, I've always loved you. And then he said, I'm proud of you, which about melted my heart because remember I said I thought he was going to be disappointed in me. And in that moment, he transported me again back into the backseat of the car. And I see the papers fly out of the window, and I yell, stop, and I get out of the car, and as I go to pick up the papers, I look over my shoulder, and Jesus walks out of the car and begins picking up papers next to me. The God of the universe is picking these things up, and I get back in the car, and Jesus is sitting next to me, and we drive away, my mom and Jesus and me in the back of the car, and I think, how strange is it to think you're alone when Jesus is in the backseat with you when you're 6 years old, right? And everything changed for me then. I was able to get closer in my relationships with my wife and my family. My business employees stuck around, and we built something beautiful together. I was able to communicate a message of hope, and it all started with two questions.